Hi, my name is Gordon Smith. I'm going to narrate this first of two videos documenting a test we did for Benjamin Button before it got its financing. The first was this 75-year-old bust of Joel Bissonnette for Digital Domain to test digital head replacement. This is the final test from Digital Domain.
Was the first test for Benjamin Button. And in here you can see that's a computer-generated head. It's pretty good, attached to the body of another actor, and it worked. And it gave the studio great relief.
The second part of the test was a 65-year-old prosthetic version of Joel. The thing I noticed about the digital character was that it didn't have a brush cut, because we had very strict instructions that both ours had brush cuts. The second video in this series talks about the building of that prosthetic. Both projects began with this head cast of Joel, which held all the information we needed. A permanent first-generation negative in platinum silicone from which we could pull a second-generation positive whenever we needed it. A wax bust for Evan Penny to start sculpting the 75-year-old bust, and a plaster bust on which to begin his prosthetic sculpt. Here, Jay McLennan, Joe Ventura, and Dave Fowler walk us through that head cast. I have taken the liberty of doubling the video speed, which I think helps see the process. First, we gave him a bald cap to cover his hair. He had a brush cut himself, which we asked him to keep. Eventually adding a full head prosthetic with its own brush cut, it was the only way to keep him from having a fat head on the day. Thankfully, he understood the problem and agreed. Second is to make sure that both the bald cap and Joel have a film of Vaseline over them. Generous over the bald cap and facial hair, but fine on the skin. We do not want it shiny, because the mold will pick that up. Then everything out of that mold will have that shine. Shine is something we would rather control on the day. Once his head is released, we cape him to expose his shoulders. They use a medical tape easy to remove from the skin. Special attention was always spent with the eyebrows and eyelashes. It is important to close the ear canal. Half a sponge ear plug will do it. Keeping it small exposes more of the ear detail. A pair of tweezers will hold it in the ear so it expands inward rather than outward. You won't lose it because the silicone will bond to it and be removed with the mold. After releasing his shoulders with Vaseline, they were ready to start making the mold. The first step is a light coat of Pliolife over the whole head. The role of this coat is to lock the image, with the least amount of weight distorting the skin. Once cured, it supports the next layer, and so on, always retaining the image caught by the first layer. We developed a platinum silicone body casting material we called SafeCast back in 1989 to solve the distortion issues we had with alginate casting. The weight from the volume of alginate required to hold its form all hung on the actor's skin, pulling it down, not information we had any use for. This process solved that problem and gave us a permanent first-generation negative mold in return. Always test, because if too firm, it can be easily softened with a little silicone diluent. Some applications you want a firmer material. Other, more delicate castings, you want them softer. Older skin, softer silicone. It's a tool, and it should be used as such. Every application is different. A silicone becomes a life-casting material after adding a filler to the silicone, which separates the molecules, lessening the grip between them, making it possible to safely remove from skin and the fine hair that covers it. Plyolife is virtually the same as LifeCast, just blue. Two things happen with adding a filler. First, it gives us a very crisp detail. Second, lessening the grip between the molecules has also lessened the silicone's tear strength. It is very much a different material now, one that became the most valuable in the studio. Dave Fowler works behind them, prepping the two-part 50-50 mix, body casting, platinum silicone, Plyolife from Mark Prince's Pink House. Other than that, there's no need to hurry. Each mix will cure in approximately 10 minutes, each new application chemically bonding to the next. Dave keeps a close watch on the process, timing when to mix the next batch, so Jay and Joel have a continuous source of materials. He has prepared everything he needs before starting, so there was no need for the process to stop. For us, head casting was always a three-man job, nothing to take lightly. In fact, we were glad of our casting material's low tear strength because if we had to, we could get it off. Never forget, there's a person encased in your mold. You will have noticed by now that Joel is left to breathe through his nose and mouth. We can do that because of the control we have over our materials. It also keeps Joel relaxed. Both Jay and Joe are professional sculptors, and they've been making molds for decades. They've made head casts like this many times. They know what thickness to build the silicone inner shell to, where to build it up, like around the ears, to ensure the plaster bandage mother mold releases with no undercuts. They are aware of the entire mold as they build all the time. Everyone has their own way of working. Joe uses a spatula, keeping his hands clean. Jay uses his fingers. In terms of the purpose of this exercise, we want Joel relaxed and trusting of what is being done to him. So the casting is a relaxed face, not one panicked for his life. For those who might have noticed the light changing like clouds passing overhead, it is. There's a 6x6 skylight directly over top of them. Light and the quality of that light was very important to us. I had skylights through the whole studio. Very often we never turned the lights on. For practicality, Jay uses a small syringe to fill his ear. They make sure the mouth and the nose are clear all the time. At the bottom of the screen, you can see us embedding a stretch lace into the rubber to stop any possibility of the silicone tearing. We do it along all its edges and up the back of the head, where we will eventually cut open the mold. We have a urethane button mold, from which David has made our buttons just before starting. A final coat is added, to which we apply our buttons to locate the silicone liner to the plaster bandage mother mold we will build next. Jay is busy putting buttons up both sides of the cut line on the back of the head, one seam of which 80% is over the bulb cap. Our next layers help strengthen the mold and fill in the form for a simpler relationship with the mother mold. The buttons around the bottom of the mold are easy to release, but the buttons on the face and the back of the head can only face forward or they become locks. A couple of misplaced buttons and you have a nightmare. All of the buttons are released with Vaseline. So is all of the bottom edge and its extra fabric. I then cut a new clean bottom edge, removing all that fabric. If I don't, the plaster of the mother mold will lock into it. David has prepared all the plaster bandage to the specific lengths they will need, so, like the silicone interior mold, there is no need to stop. All buttons are first covered with their own plaster bandage to ensure the form is locked into the mold. The plaster adds a lot of weight and cures hard, so we move as quickly as we can. They start with the back wall, where the two halves will separate. They follow the high points so they do not become undercuts. There is no guessing. That wall needs to be cured and then released liberally with Vaseline before the front half can be built up against it. Once firmed up, I release the wall with Vaseline. Once liberally released, the front half of the mold can begin. He can still breathe through both his nose and his mouth. I'll set the camera down to help remove the mother mold. And this is what the final head mold looks like. Notice the reinforcement strips that we've added to the mother mold. Once the mother mold was released, we still had Joel encased in silicone. Jay has a pair of bandage scissors with which he cuts up the back of the neck to the top of the head. The silicone has been reinforced with stretch fabric, and buttons line both sides of the cut line. Joel, inside, by now has released a lot of the silicone by moving his own face. The rest we help with hands up inside against his skin. His ears are the most elaborate to release because of how deep they are in the silicone, but they release. There he is. I always watch for signs of trauma. I've seen very macho guys not be able to handle the experience. Claustrophobia is a very real and very dangerous thing. One guy gave us a thumbs up that he was okay while we watched his heart pound so hard we could see it. Removing his ball cap and cleaning him up was all that was left to do. In the end, we have a permanent first-generation negative from which we can pull a second-generation positive detail whenever we want. A very valuable tool from which Evan Penny can begin the sculpts for his 75-year-old bust and our 64-year-old prosthetic. Be safe. If you found this video interesting or educational, you will enjoy part 2, where we explore approaches to translucent silicone gel prosthetic fabrication outside of even our box. The X-Men series explores the parameters of our platinum silicone gel prosthetic technology, documenting the makeups of Mystique, Nightcrawler, Sabretooth, Toad, and Senator Kelly. I add to that the encapsulated photographic tattoo prosthetics we pioneered to create this illusion. I would be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to promote my book, Unmasked, in 2 volumes. It's available on Amazon Kindle. Thanks.